A former hockey player and a stunning blonde woman were found dead in the bedroom, both unclothed. Before being murdered, the couple shared intimate moments together. The murder, believed to be a crime of passion, caused a stir across the United States. However, the process of capturing the culprit was far from easy, as the police seemed to have no leads. In the midst of the deadlock, a failed home burglary helped investigators identify the shooter behind the couple's murder. At this point, a new mystery was revealed, causing a massive shock and leaving everyone bewildered. So what is the truth behind this crime of passion? Let's find the answer in the video below. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified whenever a new video is released. The setting of this story takes place in Newport Beach, California, USA. On Easter, April 21, 2019, the Newport Beach Police Department in California was thrown into chaos by an emergency call at 9:27 p.m. Dean Matheson, with a panicked voice, informed the police department that his housemate, 38-year-old Darren Parch, had been shot dead along with an unknown woman. Both were lying in a pool of blood in Darren's bedroom. According to Dean, he left the house at 11:30 a.m. on April 20th to spend the night out with his fiancée. Before leaving, he noticed a pair of women's shoes and a mobile phone in the apartment. Thinking that his friend Darren was on a date and didn't want to disturb them, Dean quietly left the house. However, when Dean returned on April 21st, everything was exactly as he had left it. Sensing something was wrong, Dean called out for Darren, but there was no response. Dean decided to open Darren's bedroom door, and he was met with a horrifying scene. His close friend and an unknown woman had died. Dean immediately called 911. When the police arrived at the scene, they quickly realized both victims had been shot at close range, with no signs of self-defense, indicating that the killer had executed them almost instantly. In the room, both victims were unclothed, and it appeared they were in an intimate act when the murderer entered the room. Searching the apartment for clues, the forensics team found 4 .38 caliber bullets, but no weapon. When asked about the unknown woman, Dean said he didn't know who she was and had never seen Darren bring her home before. Moreover, the woman's mobile phone was locked, leaving the police with no clues about the identity of the woman murdered alongside Darren. At the same time, Darren's mother and sister, after receiving a call from Dean, rushed to the scene. Upon arrival, they were shocked to witness Darren lying motionless on the floor. Dana Lynn Parch, Darren's sister, her face pale, seemed barely able to stand as she saw her beloved brother had been murdered. Darren was a former minor league hockey player who transitioned into finance after retiring. With his sweet and kind personality, Darren was always loved by those around him. Darren's family firmly asserted that no one would ever want to harm him, as he had no conflicts with anyone. But if Darren wasn't the target, could the killer have aimed for the woman who was with him on that fateful night? The investigation continued with strange discoveries. While searching the apartment, investigators found an electronic key. When activated, it led them to a car parked across the street. The vehicle belonged to Wendy Miller, a 48-year-old woman. Inside the car, her wallet was intact, and her driver's license matched the image of the victim found at the scene. At the same time, the police department received a report that a woman named Wendy had been reported missing by her mother on April 21st after failing to return home that weekend. The news of Wendy's death plunged her mother and 2 children into immense grief. They couldn't believe that a devoted mother who lived so harmoniously like Wendy could meet such a tragic end. What was more surprising was that Darren's family had no idea who Wendy was, or any connection she might have had with him. On the other hand, Wendy's relatives had never heard of Darren, nor had they ever seen her bring him home to introduce him. These mysterious and overlapping events made the case even more perplexing, raising countless unanswered questions. Could there be a dark secret being hidden, or was it all just a cruel coincidence? While investigating Wendy, the police discovered that she had a complicated personal life, and it was highly likely that both victims were killed due to Wendy's personal matters. Wendy Miller's life before becoming the CEO of Wings for Justice, a charitable organization protecting children's rights, was filled with many unresolved issues. In 2016, she shared a heartbreaking story about her tumultuous marriage to her ex-husband, Pastor Eric Carpenter, and losing custody of her children. In a 15-minute video, Miller accused the family court system of being unjust for taking away her right to motherhood. Wendy accused her ex-husband of being abusive, assaulting his wife, and harming their children. But these accusations were dismissed by the court, and her ex-husband was granted full custody of their 2 children. The image of Miller clutching precious mementos like a photo of her and her children, a Christmas card with the words, "The best mother in the world," and a pile of letters from supporters across the U.S. left a deep impression of a mother tirelessly fighting for her children. What shocked authorities was that Wendy had been jailed in Michigan in 2011 for taking her son and daughter across state lines to keep them away from their father. Currently, Eric Carpenter is the lead pastor at Spring Community Church in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where he lives with his new wife and 3 children. The mysteries surrounding Miller's death continue to be investigated, with clues suggesting that conflict with her ex-husband might be one of the causes of the tragedy. When questioned, Eric Carpenter expressed sorrow over learning that his ex-wife had been murdered along with her new partner. However, Eric denied killing his ex-wife out of revenge. Furthermore, Eric provided an alibi, stating he had been in Colorado all weekend, and witnesses confirmed this to be true. Wendy's sudden death shocked her now-grown children. Miller's daughter, Cambria, was heartbroken over her mother's death, showing resentment as she struggled to face the reality.
I said, "Tell me it's a lie. Tell me it's a joke. There's no way. It's not fair." I was in such disbelief. I just wanted to know. My main question was like, what the heck happened?
Ron Marcus, a longtime friend of Wendy's, emotionally said, "I'm heartbroken over her passing. I met her just a few months ago, and she still had the same sweet, cheerful personality she had when she sat in my classroom." Meanwhile, Darren Parch had a short-lived career playing professional hockey as a forward for teams like the Waterloo Blackhawks and the San Diego Gulls. His life seemed to take a different turn when he met Wendy Miller on the night of April 19th at a local spot. Dana, a close friend of Wendy's, witnessed that night. She recalled that the 2 went to a bar late at night with a lively atmosphere and dim lighting. Wendy, as was her habit, always exuded a special charm, and it wasn't difficult for her to connect with those around her. That night, Wendy's eyes quickly met Darren's, and from the first moment, they were both drawn to each other. They talked, laughed, and it was clear that a strong connection quickly blossomed between the 2 strangers. At 1:30 a.m. on April 20th, the couple decided to leave the bar. At 1:46 a.m., Wendy texted Dana, informing her that she was at Darren's house and would spend the night there. For Dana, this seemed like a casual meeting, but she had no idea it would be the last time she would hear from her friend. When the police began their investigation, they closely examined the details from Dana's account. They quickly realized that the killer might have been following Wendy and Darren from the bar. This raised many suspicions for the police, suggesting that the murderer could have planned in advance, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. At the same time, Newport Beach law enforcement informed nearby police departments about the murder, and that the weapon used was a .38 caliber gun. As the case seemed to hit a dead end with no significant leads, an unexpected twist emerged. A witness came forward with crucial testimony, revealing an incident that had occurred just days before. On April 20th, Irvine City Police received a report of an attempted break-in at a second-floor apartment. The woman living in the apartment reported hearing strange noises that night, and when she stepped out onto her balcony, she was horrified to see a man climbing up, trying to break in. In a panic, she quickly locked the door and screamed for help, while also calling the police. The suspect, identified by the victim as an African-American male, fired a shot into her second-floor balcony ceiling as he fled. The incident seemed to end there, but the victim feared the intruder might return. Based on this, the police decided to stake out around the apartment, waiting for him to resurface. As predicted, a few days later, in the quiet darkness of the apartment complex, unusual noises caught the attention of the officers in hiding. A man matching the intruder's description was spotted by the police as he stepped out of a black Camaro. Seizing the opportunity, the police immediately approached and investigated the vehicle to determine the owner's identity. Upon checking the license plate, investigators discovered that the Camaro belonged to a man named Jamon Buggs. Jamon Buggs was no stranger to law enforcement. Bugs had a criminal record for assaulting police officers and had previously been issued a restraining order by a court to stay away from his ex-girlfriend. His presence at the scene was not just a coincidence but opened up a new line of investigation, promising to shed light on this mysterious case. The police had to call for backup as they attempted to stop Jamin for not having a front license plate. During the chase, he jumped out of the car and ran on foot with a blue bag. The police cautiously surrounded and arrested Jamin, knowing the bag might contain a gun. The bag that Jamin hurriedly threw away while fleeing was recovered by the police. Upon inspection, inside was a .38 caliber revolver, a key piece of evidence that could provide answers to the mysterious case. The gun was immediately sent to the crime lab to verify whether it was connected to the murders of Darren Parch and Wendy Miller, along with the strange occurrence on the balcony where the crime took place. During a more thorough search, the police discovered another equally important piece of evidence. Inside Jamin's Camaro, they found a mysterious stack of papers with Darren Parch's name clearly written on them. Now, the investigators almost knew who was behind the double murder. But the big question remained unanswered. What was Jamin's real motive? As Jamin was arrested and detained, the police continued to widen the investigation by checking his internet search history. The information gathered from that was terrifying evidence, further intensifying the seriousness of the case. Between April 14 and April 19, just before the murders, Jamin had searched online for personal information and the address of Darren Parch. Not stopping there, Jamin's mobile phone data also confirmed his presence at locations Darren had been, including on the night Darren and Wendy were brutally killed. Another noteworthy detail that the investigators uncovered was that Jamin had once called Darren directly. When the police questioned Dean, Darren's housemate, he recounted that Darren had mentioned a strange phone call from a man who sounded rather upset. The man warned Darren to stay away from his girlfriend, although Darren didn't know the caller's identity or the woman he referred to. Darren described the man as very angry and unwilling to believe that he had no relationship with the caller's girlfriend. The clues piled up, each mysterious piece gradually being revealed, yet the case still held too many unsolved mysteries. And the truth behind Jamin's dark motives remained a haunting question for the investigators. Initially, the police suspected that Wendy, the victim in the case, was Jamin's ex-girlfriend. However, after investigating, everything seemed to not add up. Wendy had no knowledge of anyone named Jamin and had never met him. The police shifted their investigation to Jamin's past relationships and quickly found another name, Samantha Brewer. Samantha had been a client of Jamin when he worked as a fitness trainer. Their relationship gradually evolved from professional to romantic. However, the romance quickly crumbled when Jamin began displaying excessive possessiveness, causing Samantha to feel suffocated and threatened. On January 15, 2019, at the peak of the situation, Samantha decided to file for a restraining order from the court to protect herself. When asked if she knew Darren, Samantha admitted to having met Darren a few times, but the two had never dated. The case seemed to reach a deadlock until the forensic lab presented a shocking conclusion. Jamin's gun had been used in the double murder and in a previous burglary at the apartment where Samantha's new boyfriend had lived. Not stopping there, the DNA test results directly linked Jamin to the weapon and the bullet, officially bringing him into the legal circle. These irrefutable pieces of evidence confirmed that Jamin was the one who had killed Darren and Wendy, and he was quickly arrested on murder charges. At the police station, Jamin sat across from the investigators, his face cold, but his voice full of emotion as he admitted the deep love he had for Samantha. When they first started dating, the two were very happy and were often close to each other. However, when Samantha began distancing herself and ignoring him, that love quickly turned into a fire of jealousy and rage. Jamin admitted that he couldn't bear to see Samantha becoming more and more distant, and every time he approached her, Jamin became more aggressive. His continuous violent behavior terrified Samantha to the point where she sought a restraining order, hoping to protect herself from his threats. But this only drove Jamin even crazier. He couldn't accept being rejected by his girlfriend. Things became even worse when he discovered that Samantha seemed to be seeing Darren. In his twisted mind, Jamin immediately concluded that Darren was her new lover. Jealousy exploded, turning love into an insane obsession, and Jamin was determined to harm the men he believed were involved with her. On the fateful night of the murder, Jamin accidentally saw Darren bringing a woman home. The darkness enveloped the scene, making it impossible for him to see the woman's face clearly, but in his mind, the obsessive thought that it was Samantha immediately surged. In a blind fury, Jamin decided that if Samantha had chosen to leave him, if she dared to choose another man, both of them had to pay the price. After finding Darren's address, he entered through the unlocked door and shot Darren and Wendy multiple times, thinking Wendy was Samantha, ending both lives in a fit of uncontrollable jealousy. Remarkably, even after discovering that he had killed the wrong person, Jamin did not hesitate, but continued to track Samantha and learned the whereabouts of her new boyfriend. As Jamin was planning to kill Samantha and her new boyfriend, the police arrived just in time to prevent the jealous man's next violent act. On April 25, 2022, Jamin's trial took place in a heavy, intense atmosphere. The prosecutor stated that Jamin, with a sick obsession over his ex-girlfriend Samantha, had found Darren's address after searching the internet. On that fateful evening, Jamin entered the house through an unlocked door, aiming a gun at Darren and Wendy. The gunshots rang out, Darren and Wendy fell, and no one in that small room knew that the tragedy happened simply because Jamin had mistaken Wendy for Samantha. The prosecutor continued with sharp accusations, affirming that Jamin's obsession with his ex-girlfriend led him to destroy the lives of any man he thought was associated with her. In that irrational and cruel rage, he did not hesitate to take the lives of two innocent people. After 8 days of hard work, the jury finally reached a verdict. Jamin, 47 years old, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He will spend the rest of his life at the California Correctional Facility in Tehachapi, California. At the trial, Darren and Wendy's family sat in silent, endless grief. They had lost their loved ones because of a deadly misunderstanding. Darren's sister sobbed, unable to contain her outrage. "It's horrible. Darren did nothing wrong, yet due to a mere misunderstanding, he lost his life." Darren's mother nearly collapsed upon hearing the reason for her son's death. She couldn't believe that Darren's life had been taken over such a senseless misunderstanding. For Wendy's 2 children, the pain became even harder to bear. They couldn't imagine that their mother had lost her life just because the killer mistook her for someone else. Luke Carpenter, Wendy's son, couldn't hide his anger, speaking through heavy breaths. "Just because he thought my mother was his ex-girlfriend, she lost her life." The case closed with Jamin's sentence, but the emotional scars that Darren and Wendy's family had to endure will never heal.
Ma'am, you're gonna have to calm down. There's what?
There's
October 13,
Mr. and Mrs.
2014,
Ruby and
13
Catherine
hours,
Ruby
15
laying on the
11
floor.
seconds.
I think they're dead.
They're not breathing. There's 3 subjects.
Yes, Bill. They're ice cold.
Upon entering the crime scene at the house on Bent Tree Road, Detective John Byers of the Duncan, Oklahoma, USA Police Department, along with his colleagues, were shocked by the sight before them. The bodies of John Ruby, his wife Joy Ruby, and their 13-year-old daughter had been brutally murdered, with only their eldest son unharmed, as he was not at home. The Ruby family was quite well known in Oklahoma, and initially, the police suspected Ruby's business rivals might be behind the crime. However, when the true identity of the perpetrator was revealed, not only the police, but all the residents of Duncan were stunned and horrified. So who exactly was the killer? What drove him to slaughter an innocent family? Today's story takes place in Duncan, Oklahoma, USA. This city is famous for a very rare type of tree, the black mulberry, along with vast and fertile prairies and farmland. Interestingly, state legislators have designated this city as the crepe myrtle capital, another rare type of tree in the world. The grasslands of Oklahoma are made up of shortgrass, mixed grass, and tallgrass prairies. As can be seen, Duncan is an agricultural city, ideal for those who want to live away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. However, In this seemingly peaceful and pleasant place, the residents of Duncan once experienced fear in the face of the crimes of the Ruby family. On the morning of October 13th, 2014, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a cleaning woman named Jess parked her car in front of a large house in a wealthy neighborhood. Jess came to clean this house every week and had been doing so for the past 5 years, building a trusting relationship with the homeowners, John Ruby and Joy Ruby. It is known that the Ruby family was one of the wealthiest and most famous families in Duncan. They were wealthy because they were considered local newspaper tycoons, starting from 3 generations ago and owning the daily newspaper, Duncan Banners. When this business was transferred to John Ruby, the 4th generation, the profits kept growing, increasing their wealth over time. John successfully developed it. They not only effectively managed Duncan Banners, but also bought 2 other newspapers in the area. Not only did they have admirable achievements and assets, but what made people more envious was their wonderful daughter, Catherine Ruby. Despite being born into a wealthy family, Catherine was not arrogant. She was very humble, polite, and always surrounded by great friends. Moreover, Catherine was not only from a prestigious family, but also very talented and outstanding. She was always in the top 5% of the best students at school, and was also a key member of the soccer team. In 2014, when Catherine was 17, she graduated from high school and immediately received admission offers from many prestigious universities, such as Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton. Therefore, everyone believed that her future would be very bright. Perhaps in the future, she would not only inherit the family fortune, but also develop it to a new level. However, everything turned to ashes on a winter afternoon on October 13th, 2014. The cleaning lady, Jess, did her usual work at the Ruby family's house. Jess gently knocked on the door, but no one responded, which was not unusual. According to the prior agreement with the homeowners, Jess found a spare key in a plant pot next to the entrance and unlocked the door. But as soon as she opened the door, Jess felt a chill down her spine because of the overwhelming smell of blood. She called out a few times with no response, so Jess bravely went inside to check, calling out to Mr. and Mrs. Ruby and their daughter Catherine, whom she cherished like a younger sister. What greeted Jess was the sight of the 3 bodies of John, Joy Ruby, and their 17-year-old daughter brutally murdered. Shortly after, Jess ran straight outside, her face pale, her forehead drenched in sweat from fear, trying to wipe away her tears. With trembling hands, Jess called emergency services because the entire Ruby family had perished.
Yes, ma'am. I need somebody at 1217 Bin Street. I think they've been
1217.
murdered. Yes, the Rubies. Herbie.
What's the address, ma'am?
1217
1217 what?
Bin Street.
What's going on?
I don't know. I just got here. I work for Mrs. Ruby, and all 3 of them are laying down on the floor in the kitchen.
Ma'am, you're going to have to calm down. There's what?
There's
October 13,
Mr. and Mrs.
2014,
Ruby and
13
Catherine
hours,
Ruby
50 minutes,
laying on the
11
floor.
seconds.
I think they're dead.
They're not breathing? There's 3 subjects?
Yes, they're ice cold.
This case turned the small town of Duncan into the scene of a rare and serious crime not seen in decades. Since Duncan was known for its peace, many local police officers were frightened as they had never dealt with such a horrific murder case in their careers. There were reports that at least 3 police officers developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, after completing the investigation. This tragic case also caused a wave of turmoil in the local community. People speculated whether someone had targeted the wealthy Ruby family and, in the process of robbery, faced resistance from the family and was forced to use violence. However, the forensic report soon dismissed this theory because all 3 Ruby family members died from gunshot wounds. When the police arrived at the Ruby mansion, they all had to wear masks because of the strong smell of blood. The bodies of Joy Ruby and her daughter Catherine Ruby were found in the kitchen with precise gunshots to the top of their heads. Meanwhile, John was shot twice and fell in the dining room. It seems they were attacked without any preparation, resistance, or means of self-defense. Therefore, this was likely not a spontaneous robbery, but a premeditated murder. During the investigation, and according to the maid Jess's testimony, the police discovered that the Ruby couple was very focused on family security. Thus, John and Joy had installed many cameras to monitor events inside and outside the house. However, a crucial hard drive that recorded images was removed from the control unit and taken away by someone. This could not be overlooked in the police's perspective on this serious murder case. As the case spread, all eyes turned to the only surviving member of the Ruby family, Alan Ruby, 19 years old, the Ruby's couple's eldest son and Catherine's brother. He was a freshman at the University of Oklahoma and usually lived in the school's dormitory. We might think it's fortunate that Alan was not at home. Otherwise, there would have been 4 bodies bearing the Ruby name. But the police did not think so when they learned that Alan had been missing since the incident and was busy traveling with some friends to Dallas, Texas. The police immediately issued an arrest warrant for Alan Ruby as the prime suspect. Why did they focus on Alan? This has to do with the contrasting personalities of the Ruby siblings. Although Alan and his sister Catherine were born into the same family and grew up in almost the same environment, he was never as outstanding as his sister. On the contrary, Alan was a typical spoiled rich kid, relying on his family's wealth and his parents' pampering. From a young age, Alan liked to show off and brag. His clothes were often very expensive. His shoes were branded, and Alan often had luxurious trips, enjoying shopping at upscale malls. The luxury car his father gave him for his birthday became his capital to show off on social media. Ironically, despite the strong financial support from his parents, Alan had terrible taste in food. His passion was fast food from McDonald's. Alan's daily diet revolved around combining various items or ordering individual items from the menu. When traveling abroad, while others might share delicious local dishes, Alan remained loyal to McDonald's, proudly sharing the new items he discovered on the menu. Every time there is a new dish that he has never tried before, he feels very happy and can't wait to share his thoughts on social media. It can be said that a person like Alan does not have any outstanding talents or aesthetic sense, and merely flaunts his family background, so he is neither loved nor respected by anyone. However, from around 2010 onwards, Mr. and Mrs. Ruby began facing financial difficulties, which worsened with the development of what is called the smartphone. Smartphones became increasingly popular, and mobile internet speeds also increased significantly. If something happened on the other side of the earth, within just a few minutes, news websites and even freelance journalists could report it. This was a severe blow to traditional print newspapers, especially the Ruby's family business, which was hit hard as the number of subscribers plummeted, leading the newspaper into a loss-making situation. Looking at his two children, Mr. Ruby didn't know what to say. His 17-year-old daughter, Catherine, was very much like him, with a strong, intelligent personality and the ability to independently create a life for herself. However, it was John's 22-year-old son who caused them the most headaches. Despite knowing about the family's financial crisis, Alan continued his wasteful spending habits. This really made Mr. and Mrs. Ruby feel disappointed and sad. On one hand, to reduce financial pressure immediately, their son, who was becoming useless, needed to wake up and prepare for life. The Ruby couple decided that, apart from tuition and necessary living expenses, they would not spend money on anything else. This made Alan extremely angry because, like drinking alcohol, smoking, or using banned substances, shopping can also be addictive. Later, when the case was closed, Alan Ruby was diagnosed with compulsive buying disorder, CBD. It is known that this syndrome often appears in young people around the age of 20. CBD patients include not only those who shop beyond their financial means, but also those who spend too much time shopping, or even those who constantly fantasize about shopping without actually doing it. Therefore, Alan's mood was very depressed, so he negotiated with his parents. But after realizing their firm attitude, he could only choose to give up. But similar to other addicts, sometimes to satisfy their desires, they can do anything without thinking about the consequences. From then on, Alan began to get close to his grandmother, showing unprecedented respect and filial piety. Of course, his ultimate goal was still money. After gaining his grandmother's trust, Alan used her personal information to create a credit card with a limit exceeding the allowable amount. After getting the money, he immediately boarded a flight to Europe, starting a luxurious and romantic vacation that he had longed for. Alan spent over $5,000 and then updated a series of bragging photos on social media for his friends. After that, he contentedly returned to the US, thinking that even if he had did such things, his parents would only scold him once and then let it go. But when he landed, he was greeted by police officers with an arrest warrant and a pair of cold handcuffs. Abusing someone else's identity and using their credit card is considered a serious crime. In some cases, it can lead to a prison sentence. Thus, it can be seen that the Ruby couple had completely lost hope in their son, who spent money like water, and only hoped that the law would make Alan realize his mistakes. Even so, in the end, since he was still their biological son, Mr. and Mrs. Ruby, like all parents, couldn't completely sever all ties because, after all, he was still their son. Therefore, after a period of detention, Alan was only given a suspended sentence and was released. But unfortunately, the experience of eating prison food did not make Alan become a terrifying demon. After being released, Alan continued to live an undisciplined life and spent money uncontrollably as if his parents cutting off financial support had never happened. People said that the reason Alan could continue this way was that he borrowed from the exchange. A few of Alan's classmates said that his parents' actions were too troublesome, too much, and that he even wanted to kill both of them and his sister Catherine to monopolize the vast fortune. These words quickly spread through Alan's peers and eventually reached Catherine. But the gentle girl thought these were just her brother's angry words, so she didn't pay attention and didn't tell her parents either. Time passed until October 13th, 2014. Cleaner Jess found the cold bodies of the middle-aged couple and Catherine. Because the Ruby family was quite famous in the area, the police were very familiar with their family and with the previous incident when their son Alan stole his grandmother's credit card. From the early stages of the investigation, the police focused on finding Alan, the eldest son who had gone missing. After knowing Alan had gone to Dallas with a few friends and was staying at a 5-star Ritz-Carlton hotel, Officer Duncan asked the Texas police for cooperation and successfully arrested Alan Ruby. But at that time, the police arrested Alan Ruby not for suspicion of murder, but because he violated the travel restriction during his probation period. However, after Alan was brought back to Duncan, the police didn't care about his violation of unauthorized travel, but focused on considering him the prime suspect in the Ruby family murder case. Faced with intense police interrogation, Alan began his act. When hearing the officers say that his parents and sister had been murdered, Alan appeared extremely shocked, then burst into tears, showing immense grief and despair over the sudden wrongful death of his family. However, when the police interrogated him and hinted that he was the murderer, Alan confidently asserted his innocence with solid alibis. The police interrogated Alan's friends who went to the Dallas trip, and they all testified that, at the time of the incident, Alan was at school. These clues and testimonies soon became useless to the police, as they point out the holes in Alan's alibi. According to forensic investigation, they estimated the time of death of the victims to be the night of October 9th, approximately 4 days before the bodies were discovered. Records of Alan's absence from the scene and his credit card transactions indicate that he had ample time to commit the crime during that period. Faced with professional interrogation, pressure techniques, and a polygraph test from the police, Alan tried to stay calm and reassure himself to avoid revealing anything. However, after hours of continuous pressure, Alan couldn't withstand it any longer and completely broke down. In the end, Alan cried like a child and confessed the entire process of his crime. It turns out that after his family cut off financial support, Alan's mind was solely focused on finding ways to make money. Despite being recently convicted of credit card fraud involving his grandmother, this greedy individual paid no heed to the consequences and continued to target his grandmother's bank account. Alan forged a signature to write himself a check worth up to $17,000. After spending all this money, he borrowed several thousand more dollars from the black credit market. At this point, he realized he couldn't repay his debts. Facing pressure from creditors constantly demanding money, Alan felt an unprecedented level of stress. Ultimately, he decided to target his parents because if they suddenly died, Alan would surely inherit a substantial fortune. Additionally, Alan knew his parents had recently purchased life insurance, so there was a lot of money in front of him if they disappeared from the world. However, Alan understood that in his parents' eyes, he had become a useless child, who had done nothing significant with his life. If they had made a will, the main heir of the assets and insurance money would definitely be his sister, Catherine, who was both beautiful and talented, beloved by everyone. After detailing a plan to deal with his family, on the afternoon of October 9th, 2014, Alan intentionally left his mobile phone at his university dormitory to create a false alibi that he had left the campus. Then Alan drove home to prepare his heinous plan. That evening, Mr. John Ruby had to go out for some reason, providing an extremely opportune moment for Alan to commit his crime. He sneaked outside and took a 9mm handgun from his father's truck for self-defense. When he returned inside the house, he saw his mother, Mrs. Joy, preparing ingredients for dinner.
About it. Tell me how it went down. Who'd you shoot first?
My mom. When my sister was home, she was outside washing her car. My dad was at work still. And she walked in, and as soon as she went in the kitchen, I shot her.
How much longer before Dad came home?
An hour or so.
An hour you had to sit in there with your dead mom and your dead sister?
Or so.
Where did you shoot Dad?
In the head.
After committing such a heinous crime, Alan felt an unusual sense of satisfaction. For the first time, he felt in control after months of financial strain from his family. According to his plan, he went to the house's surveillance system recorder, removed the hard drive, and quickly returned to campus. He used the last bit of money stolen from his grandmother to bring some friends to Dallas, rent a room in a 5-star hotel, and throw a party all night. All party expenses were paid by him to create an alibi. Even while partying with his friends, the murderer posted a picture of 2 friends on his Instagram with the caption, "Student life isn't fun without these 2 people." Now there was only one last problem. Where had Alan hidden the murder weapon and the hard drive containing the surveillance video? When Alan said he had thrown the gun and the hard drive into a nearby small lake, the police sent divers to search, but found nothing. Without these 2 crucial pieces of evidence, the case wouldn't be complete. Fortunately, during an examination of his grandmother's bank transactions, the police discovered a storage company that regularly deducted money from her credit card. Investigators immediately went to that storage facility. Reviewing the surveillance footage, they saw Alan's car arriving there on the day of the crime. When they opened the storage unit, the police found the missing gun and hard drive. With this irrefutable evidence and Alan's confession, the case was finally solved. The prosecutor's office immediately informed the media that due to severity of the case, they would seek the death penalty. This terrified Alan, who promptly offered to plead guilty in hopes of sparing his life. Family members of the Ruby family, including the defendant's uncle, aunt, and grandfather, expressed to the prosecutor's office that although they deeply hated Alan, they did not want to see him executed. In the US, a death sentence can take decades or more from sentencing to execution. During that time, the courts often reopen cases multiple times due to appeals from death row inmates. This means the painful memories are repeatedly reopened, a cruel torture for the victims' families. Now, they only wish for Alan to be imprisoned forever and never appear in their lives again. After listening to the family's request, the prosecutor's office changed its request. On June 10, 2016, Alan was sentenced to life in prison for murder. The moment he received the sentence, he shed tears. These were not tears of remorse or regret for killing his family. They were crocodile tears. He cried because he knew his life was over, emphasized the court. Thank you for watching the entire video. If you liked it, please press the like button to support our channel. Goodbye, and see you in the next fascinating story.